The Buffalo Bills announced this afternoon that they have signed wide receiver Brandin Cooks to the active roster. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that all of Buffalo's problems are solved now and that the Bills are going to win the Super Bowl, but at first glance, I do really like this signing because not only is it a wide receiver, Brandin Cooks brings a speed element with him and can be the downfield vertical threat that this offense has desperately needed all season long. And if you've been following along with my videos, and I guess as you can see, this would be a good time to remind you to smash that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. But the thing that I've been trying to stress all season long is that the Bills don't have anyone who can pose that threat to the opposing defense. They don't have that wide receiver who can just go up and get the ball. They don't have the wide receiver who can be relied on in a gotta have it moment. And teams are starting to pick up on this to the point where after the game on Thursday night, Texan safety Kalen Bullock said the Bills didn't do anything different than what we've seen on film. And he didn't say this, I'm saying it. Joe Brady has gotten very stale and predictable with his play calling. And the defenses, as Kalen Bullock said, they know what's coming now because the Bills just don't have that piece. And again, Brandin Cooks isn't going to be the piece. He's not the Chris Olave that we were clamoring for at the trade deadline. But this is a kind of player that can prevent the defense from creeping up and selling out to stop the run. Because what I said after that Patriots game, and really the Falcons game too, the Patriots and the Falcons did the same thing. They said, you guys don't have any wide receivers who scare us. So we're just going to defend the middle of the field and stack the box. And we're going to stop James Cook, Khalil Shakir, and Dalton Kincaid because we love our chances with Christian Gonzalez going up against Keon Coleman. We love our chances with AJ Terrell going up against Keon Coleman. Or take your pick. I mean, with Khalil Shakir being in the slot, that's a little bit different. But when you have guys like Curtis Samuel, Elijah Moore lining up out there, I mean, these defenses are licking their chops. The Miami game, that was more of an anomaly. I really don't know what happened there because the Bills couldn't even move the ball on backup defensive backs. And Houston's defense didn't do anything crazy or exotic either. I don't even think they blitzed the Bills that much. They basically just said, we have an elite defense that we've built from the ground up. We've drafted really well. We've signed some free agents. We've acquired some players. And let's see if your guys can beat our guys. And as we know, the Bills could not. And the crazy part is, as I said, Joe Brady did nothing to adjust or adapt throughout the game. They just kept doing the same thing. And even D'Amico Ryan said, I just saw a clip the other day where he said, usually teams will chip or they will do something. They'll add Alec Anderson. They'll throw out an extra tight end so that they can block Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. And they basically, Joe Brady left Josh Allen hung out to dry. Now, you might be thinking, does it really make a difference whether the Bills had Brandin Cooks or not? Because if Josh has no time to find his wide receivers down the field, what good is it to have Brandin Cooks in that speed? And that's a fair assessment, but I think that there are bigger issues that I will get to later on in this episode. And I think that those big issues start with Brandon Beane. So before we get into some of the bigger issues that the Bills are facing, let's take a look at Brandin Cooks' stats and see if he will actually be able to help this team. So first of all, Brandin Cooks is a former first-round pick of the New Orleans Saints in the 2014 draft. And a couple of interesting notes. Number one, he was college teammates with Jordan Poyer at Oregon State. Number two, he was a fourth wide receiver that was drafted in 2014. And the Bills have now rostered 5 out of the top 15 wide receivers from that infamous draft. So the 2014 wide receiver draft order was Sammy Watkins, who the Bills traded up for, Mike Evans, Odell Beckham Jr., Brandin Cooks, Kelvin Benjamin, Marquise Lee, Jordan Matthews, Paul Richardson, Devontae Adams, Cody Latimer, Allen Robinson, Jarvis Landry, Josh Huff, Dante Moncrief, and John Brown. So Sammy Watkins, Kelvin Benjamin, Jordan Matthews, John Brown, and now Brandin Cooks are the 5 wide receivers that the Bills have had. And actually, I believe Walt Powell was also part of that draft class as well. So the Bills did not strike gold, but they have circled around that draft class. And people are still talking about Odell Beckham Jr., and there's always rumors floating around with him. Now, as for what Cooks has done in the league, so in those 12 years, 4 of them have been with the Saints, 3 with the Texans, 2 with the Rams, 2 with the Cowboys, and 1 with the Patriots. And I actually saw from Sal Capaccio that Brandin Cooks and Eric Dickerson are the only players in NFL history to have been traded 4 times. So he has bounced around. But upon looking at his stats here, I was pretty shocked to see that in 6 out of 7 seasons, Cooks went for over 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. So if you look from 2015 to 2021, Brandin Cooks had at least 114 targets, at least 65 receptions, at least 1,000 yards, and at least 5 receiving touchdowns. So again, I don't think that this is a needle mover, but I do think that this could be a solid piece because at this point of the year, you're not going to do much better because the Bills are essentially on plan D right now. Plan A was trying to acquire Jalen Waddle and Beane whiffed at the deadline. Plan B was Brandin Cooks' teammate Rashid Shaheed, and he got dealt to Seattle. So I don't know if that was because the Bills were trying to get Jalen Waddle and they ran out of time, or maybe they weren't interested, or the capital was too much to go get a Shaheed. But that was a B-level player that I was looking at. Plan C was McCole Hardman, who they signed off the street. And that was fun while it lasted for a whole 7 minutes. And then he found himself on IR. So now the Bills are on plan D here with Brandin Cooks. So when you look at it that way, I think it's a fair assessment to say that I don't expect him to necessarily go off and be the savior, but I think he can help given where the Bills are at. That being said, I want to talk about Brandon Beane now because I woke up today very irritated that the news that I saw was that the Bills have signed Shaq Lawson to their practice squad. And I'm like, man, you got to be kidding me. This just seems like a sick joke at this point where Brandon Beane is trolling us. Shaq Lawson played one game last year for the Carolina Panthers, has not played anywhere this year. So you mean to tell me, I know you have injuries and I know he knows the system, but you mean to tell me that you can't find a body that's played NFL football this year, let alone last year? And we have to bring back all these former players. And you might say, well, it's just a practice squad signing. Why do you care so much? And I get that. But we said the same thing about Jordan Poyer, Gabe Davis, and Dane Jackson. Hey, they know the system. They're good for the community. This is a good, smart move. They can be coaches in practice. But it could be a problem if they have to play. And now all three of them have been playing meaningful snaps, especially Jordan Poyer and Gabe Davis. Balin Spector's on the practice squad. With Terrell Bernard's injury and Shaq Thompson being 31 years old, we might have to use Balin Spector this season. So after Thursday night's game, I really didn't know what to say because I felt pretty numb. And I didn't know where to point the blame because it just feels like there are so many issues with this team. So the first thing that I was able to put together was that it feels like we're wasting Josh Allen. That's number one. Number two, the next day on Friday, I said, and I'll just pull up the tweet here. So I said, as I wake up this morning, this is where my head is at. The Bills spent most of their offseason retooling their defense, heavily investing both in free agency and the draft, while basically saying that the offense was fine because they have Josh Allen and scored 30 points per game last season. But yet, the defense still lacks high-impact players and has somehow regressed to the point where it's one of the worst defenses in Josh Allen's career, albeit they do have tons of injuries. And subsequently, as a result, the wide receiver room is one of the worst in Allen's career as well. And here's the kicker. Houston's defense, a defense that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott aspire to be, just embarrassed Buffalo's offense and made them look broken yet again, while the Bills' revamped defense somehow allowed Davis Mills, a backup quarterback, to play better than their MVP quarterback. I really don't understand how we've gotten here. So then the next day, I had a conversation with someone that night, and then the next day I woke up and I tweeted this. So I tried answering my own question about how we've gotten here. And I think it starts with Brandon Beane and his roster construction. A lot of good, not elite players were given large contracts and are now either regressing or underperforming. The Bills have way too many big cap hits on players who aren't worth the money anymore. Dawson Knox, Matt Milano, and Curtis Samuel account for almost $36 million against the cap. Speaking of the cap, Buffalo is in cap hell. As of the trade deadline, Albert Breer said that they have the least amount of cap space in the NFL. And I know that they've been doing some roster shuffling these last couple of weeks, so I don't know exactly where it's at, but it's pretty minimal. The Bills have missed too many draft picks over the last few years during this mini rebuild, quintessentially with Keon Coleman. The wide receiver position has been neglected for years, and it has caught up to them to the point where now they are signing Brandin Cooks. And I know I just spent the last few minutes saying that it's a good signing, which it is, but it is also an indictment that it's gotten to this point that we're excited for a 32-year-old wide receiver just because Brandon Beane finally did something and realized that Bitching about wide receiver wasn't that crazy in the first place. As I mentioned, he whiffed at the deadline, failing to add any pieces to help this roster. He signed and drafted players, and I think this is a big one here that maybe needs to be talked about more. But Brandon Beane signed and drafted players who could fit the system, but the system isn't working anymore, and McDermott has a reluctance to change it. How many guys have we gone through? And I can criticize Beane all I want, but maybe this is a McDermott problem too, because you look at someone like Poona Ford or Tim Settle, well, they're not adjusting to the system. They don't know the system. They can't understand it. Well, how hard can it be when they go on and have some of their best career years elsewhere? You mean to tell me that they're that bad of players? I don't think so. That being said, the run defense continues to be a huge problem. The pass defense still cannot generate consistent pressure. Greg Rousseau has 3 sacks after inking that $20 million extension. I know he's been playing pretty well, but I need to see him get quarterbacks on the ground. And then rounding this out with Joe Brady here, as I mentioned, he lacks creativity and has become way too predictable as the offensive coordinator. He struggles to scheme wide receivers open. So I hope he knows how to use Brandin Cooks because, as you can see throughout his career, he hasn't just been a gadget player. He can be a volume receiver on the boundary. And finally, with Joe Brady, he failed to shift protection as his offensive line got abused and Josh Allen was running for his life. So, as I said there, I rattled off a dozen problems from coaching and management, and I didn't even include the players' on-field execution or all the injuries. So I still don't think that this is a Super Bowl team. I think Brandin Cooks is going to help, but I think that there are a lot of issues here with this team. The division seems like it's gone. The Patriots are 10-2. They currently hold the 1 seed. The Bills are 7-4, treading water. This is a huge game coming up against Pittsburgh, who is right behind the Bills, and so is Kansas City and Houston. So if the Bills lose this game against Pittsburgh, they're currently the 7th seed. They're going to be in the hunt. I can't believe I'm saying that. The Bills are going to be back in the drought era of in the hunt, trying to get back in the playoff picture, and they did this to themselves. But I want to finish on a positive note. So I will say that Sean McDermott is 18-3 in December over his career. So the Bills do have that. We know that they can go on these runs and they typically play their best football in late November and December, but then January is where it catches up to them. And that is exactly what I can see on the horizon in the near future. So comment below. Let me know what you think about Brandin Cooks. Let me know what you think about Brandon Beane. And as I said with the thumbnail, did Brandon Beane cook or is he cooked as a Bills GM?